Once upon a time, there was a hero. Like every hero.
Well guys, I got another indie game for y'all, and this time it's Stories, Path of Destinies. Now, if this game wasn't recommended to me on GameFAQs by a person who knows my taste in games, I would have ignored the game completely. And all because it has such a very generic, very unappealing title. The people need to understand that the name of your product, the name of your game, or whatever it is you're doing has to be appealing and interesting to people so they can check out your product. And that's my first and biggest criticism of this title, of this game. It's just how ambiguous the title is. Unfortunately, for the developers and for the game, because there is an outstanding game behind this generic, unimpressive name. So, just what kind of game this is? Well, we're looking at an action-adventure game that lets you choose your own path, as the name implies. It's a choose-your-own-adventure game with action RPG elements. Now, this game is not very heavy on the RPG side of things, but it does have RPG elements. That's why I consider it an action-adventure first and foremost, with RPG elements. As the game's title suggests, this is a story-heavy, story-driven game, so we're going to talk about the story first, and we'll get to the gameplay mechanics and RPG mechanics a little bit later.
How many? The war was a blur, and now 3 Raven scout ships were chasing him.
Where are you running, rebel?
Cawed the Raven captain over the loud hailer. Renato could see them cranking up their catapults. Just going out for milk? Renato yelled back.
As I already mentioned, Stories Path of Destinies is a choose-your-own-adventure type of game, meaning that as you progress through the story, you have to make certain choices, and those choices affect your story. Now, in most games, usually these type of choices all lead to the same ending with very minor alterations to the story or ending itself. However, in this particular game, every choice you make has tremendous consequences on the story and ending you're gonna get. The game only has one good, one true ending, and the other 24 or so endings, I'm not sure how many there are, but there's a whole bunch of them, all seem to lead our hero to his demise in one way or another. And that's not really a spoiler, because you're gonna learn this early on, because the whole point of the story, the main tale or main story of the game, is that our hero Reynardo relives these moments and makes different choices every time in order to uncover the truth, in order to save the world or save whatever he is supposed to do. So with this in mind, you're expected to make informed choices on subsequent playthroughs and see how these choices affect the story and how they change things up. Imagine that this is basically a time travel game where you are stuck in a time loop and you make different choices based on past, or in this case, past and future experiences you've had. So, the more you and your buddy Reynardo learn about the game's world, the characters you interact with, the more you learn about certain artifacts you hunt down and so forth, the more new choices you can make on subsequent playthroughs of the same events. So you are expected to make informed choices and eventually uncover the truth and reach the good ending of the game. The story itself doesn't have fancy animated cutscenes. The way it's presented is through incredible narration. The narrator is an absolutely incredibly talented person who really manages to bring this story to life. The characters, the story, regardless of what, he does all the voices for every member of the cast, and each and every character he voices, he manages to bring to life. It's amazing, whether it's a female or a male character, it doesn't matter. What this guy does is outstanding. And other than the excellent narration, we also have very well done, very beautifully done, still storybook illustrations. The illustrations themselves are very well done, and the art style, as I said, is outstanding. However, I do feel that at times they could have been a tad more expressive. Now, that's just me nitpicking.
It's part of your nature. Just take joy in it. I mean, I might as well.
This type of storytelling actually manages to spark your imagination. So, when you think back on the game and the story and the events you've experienced, you don't remember them as the still storybook images you saw, but rather, at least that's what it's like for me. I remember this story as a cartoon, as a movie I've seen, because it's so well presented, it's so well read that it just creates this entire movie, entire cartoon in your head, even though the cutscenes, the animations aren't there. So what they managed to do with excellent writing, with outstanding narration in this game is incredible. I just don't know what else to say.
And some new ones. Now, you really ought to ask for a raise.
The writers did an outstanding job when it comes to conveying Reynardo's personality and character to the player. Ever so often, we get glimpses of Reynardo's inner thoughts, of his feelings, of some of his memories from the past, and this is done in a very humane, very real way. Some of his thoughts are funny, some are a tad more serious, some don't even make sense, but that's the kind of stuff that every normal human being has going through their mind, and it's just amazing how well presented all this is.
Reynardo wondered what would happen if he jumped. Would he be rescued by an emergency platform?
However, narration alone wouldn't really create that magical, that unique atmosphere the game has. For that to happen, we also need good music. And once again, this game excels at its musical score. It's just so fitting, it's just so perfect for the type of atmosphere this title is going for. The outstanding voice acting, great music, and absolutely gorgeous art style, they all come together to create a very unique and very beautiful experience aesthetically. It's obvious that a lot of love went into creating this world and its backstory, because there's a lot more to this world than what the game presents in its main story. As you explore the environments, you're going to notice some small details that give us a glimpse of what the inhabitants of this world are like, what their daily lives are like, and it's just amazing. They're small environments. This is a short game with fairly linear levels despite its branching paths in the story. So once you explore the levels in their entirety, there isn't all that much to see. However, what is there suggests that the developers, or rather story writers, thought out a much more complex, much bigger world which has some very unique and interesting aspects to it. And as you explore the levels, you come across letters that a certain character in the game writes to a different character, and you learn a little bit about the characters as well as a lot about the world itself, and it's just amazing. It just shows that this particular world, this setting, has a ton of potential for sequels. It has a ton of potential for spin-offs. It's amazing. Alright guys, so we talked about aesthetics, and the game is incredible in that regard, and I love it a lot. Gameplay is also fun, and we're going to talk about gameplay in a bit, and we're going to discuss some issues that I had, mostly technical issues with the game, that unfortunately I have to mention, even though they honestly don't bother me all that much, and my experience was fantastic despite those technical problems. Now, speaking of technical problems, and I'll just get them out of the way now. During several of my playthroughs, at a certain point in the game, the ground and the environment completely disappeared, so I just had to walk on air and navigate the invisible environment for that particular segment of the level until I got out of it. So there was a bit of an issue there, but it seems to be gone now. I don't know if it was patched or the developers are well aware of it. I reported it on Steam and they immediately responded and all that. Now, in certain levels, in the tutorial level and such, for me, I don't know if it's like that for other people, there is a problem with the main light source, which makes certain objects cast shadows and other objects don't seem to cast shadows. However, that is isolated to the tutorial level and a portion of one other level later on. It's nothing major, it's not a big deal. So, these technical problems are pretty minor. However, there is one fairly major issue I encountered. And we'll talk about that now.
Go ahead. I'm sure you know better, said Lupino.
You see, what happened is, I got the best possible ending in the game earlier than I was supposed to. Basically, I was on a certain path in the game and everything was going well, or it wasn't going well story-wise, but for that path, that's the way things unfold. And somehow what happened in the last level of the game, that particular story path, a cutscene triggered that wasn't supposed to trigger. And once that cutscene triggered, I was set on the path for the best possible ending in the game, and I got the best ending, even though my storyline up until that point sure as heck wasn't leading to a good ending. So that happened, but fortunately Stories Path of Destinies lets you play the game more after you finish it. You can unlock new stories that you didn't unlock and such. So I was able to replay the path I was on properly, and I was able to play the best possible path in the game to get the best possible ending of the game properly as I was supposed to. So it's all good. I experienced the game as I should have. It's really not that big a deal for me at the end, but when it happened, I was fairly upset because I thought it ruined my game and that I wouldn't be able to experience it properly, but I was, and it's all good. The developers are aware of this, and I'm sure they will fix it. However, it's a problem that seems to happen very rarely. I don't know of anybody else who experienced this, so this is not something that should stop you from trying the game out, from buying it and such. So just know that yes, it can happen, but it probably will not happen to you. In terms of gameplay stories, A Path of Destinies is a very simple yet entertaining title. It has very light RPG elements where the more you fight, the more experience you gain, and once you level up you get your skill point, which you can allocate to different types of skills. However, I won't get into this because there's no point in me explaining a very simple, very superficial system like this. Anybody who's ever played a video game is bound to understand it, and those new to games shouldn't have any problems getting into this. So it's very straightforward, it's very simple. Which is a good thing. I don't like overly complex mechanics in games anyways. The game also has a crafting mechanic and another upgrade mechanic for your character where you equip gems to your gauntlet, which give you some passive abilities. Now, the crafting mechanics are very simple and very easy to understand. There isn't much crafting to be done actually, it's just you collecting crafting materials as you play the game. They're usually stuffed in chests and such, and you spend these crafting materials at a crafting station where you essentially buy or upgrade new swords, and that's all there is to it. Now, each of these swords has unique abilities which you can utilize in combat when needed. However, combat is fairly simple for the most part and only gets challenging later on after your first few playthroughs. And that's when you're gonna want to use these different swords and their magical ability they come with. There's also different skills you can upgrade for your character that also help ease combat. And even though combat does get increasingly more difficult and more challenging the more you replay these same events of the story, your character always feels to be one step ahead. At least that's how he felt to me. So while you will encounter certain difficult fights, there really isn't anything that is going to get you stuck or make you hit a wall and make you unable to progress, which is excellent, which is why I love this game so much. Now, there is a big problem I have with the game, and that is the way you heal your character. I think there is a problem with healing drops. Basically, what happens is you collect fruit, apples or whatever, to heal yourself. From what I've seen, and from what I can tell, if your health is at full maximum capacity or near full, you're going to get healing drops a hell of a lot more than when your health is low, and that's a huge problem. I think there is something wrong with the drop mechanic, and that's why it does this. It also does this with your magical energy, which is used for the special abilities the swords have. When the magical energy is full, you're bound to get more magical energy drops, which are completely useless to you. If it's low, then you ain't gonna get magical drops, or at least you're not gonna get as many items that restore your magical energy, and that's a huge problem in the game, in my opinion. However, checkpoints are very frequent. If you lose, you can just start over. It's not going to fill your health back up completely or your magical energy, but it usually gives you enough health for you to have the upper hand in combat if you are careful. Now, combat itself is counter-attack based. It's a similar combat to what you'd see in games like the Batman Arkham games, like Assassin's Creed, and this is generally not the type of combat I enjoy a lot because I feel it's very restrictive, and that is true in this game as well. However, it's very well executed here, it's very satisfying, and for the most part it's fairly easy to tell which enemy is about to attack so that you can deliver a counterattack. Basically, the combat mechanics are very simple. What happens is an exclamation mark appears above an enemy who is about to attack you, and you're supposed to attack in their direction to intercept their blow and deliver a blow of your own, which, once you level up properly, can be completely devastating to the enemy. There is a bit of strategy to combat later on when you have to know which enemies to take out first, and there are certain enemies that buff the other bad guys, and then there are those who have strong magical attacks that you need to avoid. There are also enemies that explode on impact, so you need to utilize these enemies to damage other enemies and so forth. You can pick up enemies, throw them, you can hook their shields, remove them, and so on. The more you level up, the more abilities you gain. And it's all a lot of fun. However, honestly, combat is very repetitive in this game, and there's very little enemy variety, which to me gets kind of boring, because the only types of enemies you fight are ravens, and there are no bosses, there are no big giant bosses, and that could have been amazing if done properly in this game. Given this game's world, given this game's art style, it could have been incredibly downright epic if they had some major big boss fights. Unfortunately, from beginning to end, there are no such boss fights, and that's a huge negative in my opinion. It would have been amazing if they did that, but they didn't. Overall, it's a very well put together combat system that is fun. However, it can get tiring, it can get repetitive, because there isn't anything else to break it up, to make it a little bit more refreshing. At least if they had more enemy types, it would have been a lot more fun.
Hey, how do you tell if someone's far away or just really small?
However, this wasn't a problem for me, because Stories: A Path of Destinies is the kind of game that you can play in short bursts. And that's very important to me. Alright, so I can just pick up a level, go through it, the game saves automatically, I can turn the game off, then do something else, and go back and play another level. And if you play the game like that, you're not going to feel that, it's not going to feel like it's a burden on you, alright? It's not going to be as taxing as if you were to obsessively play it from beginning to end. You can just play it little by little, and you will eventually finish a whole bunch of stories and unlock true ending and enjoy the game completely. Just don't play it all in one sitting, because it's going to get tired like that. So guys, that's all I have to say about this wonderful little game. I strongly recommend that you buy it and give it a chance, because this is a great experience to have. This is an honest game. This is not one of those overly pretentious, weird indie games that try too hard to be artistic. No, this is the kind of game that's honest, that tells an interesting little adventure story, that has really charming characters, that has an outstanding storyteller who really brings the game to life, the game's world, the game's characters to life. It's just amazing what was done with this game, and I wholeheartedly recommend that you try it out, that you play it, give it a chance. Understand that yes, it does get repetitive, but as I said, play it little by little and that won't be a problem. So I hope you'll enjoy this game, I hope you'll give it a chance, and well, that's about it for this review.